Welcome back to the Equilibrium Report, where we cut through the political theater and dig into what's actually happening beneath the headlines. Today's topic, the false labor shortage. Because when every major country keeps saying, we just can't find workers, maybe the problem isn't the people, maybe it's the system. You've heard it everywhere. There aren't enough workers. People don't want to work anymore. Everyone's lazy. Labor shortages are killing the economy. Blah, 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 blah. It's become the global chorus, from the United States to Japan to Europe. But here's the truth. There is no real shortage of people willing to work. That should be obvious. Look around, right? There's a shortage of people willing to work for what corporations want to pay, which frankly is nothing, or pennies on the dollar to someone else and not to the actual worker. Companies say they can't fill jobs, but when you look closer, it's not because people vanish, it's because wages, conditions, and housing costs no longer match reality. And there's a whole other topic you can go into that branches off into this when it comes to ghost jobs and the fake job listings and whatnot, because everywhere I've moved to, I've applied for entry-level beginner jobs that always were advertising just to see, not even because I needed it, just to see what was actually going on. And sure enough, they wouldn't even give you an interview, if they even ever got back to you. Usually, if you got anything at all, it was like an email, just a canned email response saying no, basically. And I've noticed it, in Japan. I watch NHK Japan all the time, every day. And even just today, their last couple presidents and the new one they have, or prime minister or whatever they call it, the new lady, even, they're still talking about the same thing. And Japan does not have a labor shortage. What they have is a shortage of cheap labor. And they talk about it openly, like it's nothing. They're like, yeah, we need to import more people from Indonesia or whatever the hell they get them for cheap labor, blah, 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 blah. At least they're honest about it, They openly say they need to bring in foreign workers to fill in labor gaps. Not because there aren't Japanese citizens who could work, but because it's cheaper to import the labor than to reform domestic pay scales. In the United States, the government avoids saying this out loud, but the mechanism is the same. They call it worker visas, global competitiveness, or economic migration. In plain terms, it's cheap labor outsourcing, just moved inside the border. This isn't new. It's an ancient economic formula, one that's been running since the days of Sumeria, when city-states thrived by importing slave or low-class labor to maintain production and wealth at the top. They would go out and get people from hunter-gatherer tribes, people that weren't part of the civilization still, and they would abduct them, and all sorts of atrocities had to have been happening. Anyway, they would take those people and do it, or tribal type people. And then eventually, if they ran out of that, or if they couldn't access those, then it turned into doing that with other neighboring cities and city-states, or whatever they call them. And that's kind of where the modern world, evolved from. And it's been the same for thousands of years. Every empire since has followed this same model. 1. Exploit a cheaper labor class. 2. Call it economic efficiency. 3. Use propaganda to frame it as a shortage or necessity. The faces change, the method doesn't. Whether it's Rome bringing in conquered labor, Britain exploiting colonies, or modern nations importing low-wage workers, the underlying logic is identical. Keep costs low, keep growth high, keep the public divided. Governments could be honest about this. They could say, yes, we rely on cheaper foreign labor to sustain our economies. Without it, your food, tech, and housing would cost significantly more. But they don't, because saying that would expose an uncomfortable truth. Our prosperity is built on global inequality. For the system to function, someone has to stay underpaid, unseen, and voiceless. So instead of acknowledging that, leaders push the lazy workers narrative. They say, Americans don't want to work, or Japan's population is too old, or Europe needs immigrants to survive, etc., etc., etc. It's not about survival, It's about profit optimization. The irony here is that importing cheap labor doesn't actually fix the problem. It just pauses it. Wages stagnate. Domestic workers get squeezed out. New arrivals face exploitation. And the system keeps demanding more and more inputs just to stay stable. It's a treadmill disguised as progress. If governments were honest, they'd admit that this version of global growth depends on keeping parts of the world poor, or at least cheaper. That's the equilibrium no one wants to talk about. Prosperity through imbalance. So the next time you hear a politician talk about labor shortages, listen closely. It's not that the workers disappeared, it's that they woke up. They realized that the game was rigged, that growth often means keeping someone else small. The real shortage isn't labor, it's honesty. And until the governments admit that, this cycle, from Sumeria to Silicon Valley, will keep repeating under new names and new excuses, because in the end, you can't build balance on inequality. This is the Equilibrium Report. Thank you for watching.
You are watching the Equilibrium Report. Stay free, stay true, stay defiant.